I'm standing in a motorcycle dealership in Phoenix, staring at a brand new Honda CB1000R with a $5,149 price tag, and the salesman just told me something that made my jaw drop. This exact same bike has been sitting on his lot for 8 months, even after 2 price cuts. But here's the crazy part. 3 blocks away at a used car lot, I watch people literally fighting over a 2019 Toyota Corolla with 85,000 miles, priced at $18,995. What's happening in 2025 isn't just about motorcycles losing value. Entire categories of bikes have become financial death traps that even desperate dealers can't move. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the motorcycles that are destroying owners' wallets and why smart buyers are running in the opposite direction. Let's start with the Kawasaki Ninja E1, a bike that represents everything wrong with rushing innovation to market. When I first saw this electric Ninja at a dealership in Denver, the owner Mike couldn't hide his frustration. "I thought I was getting Kawasaki's version of the future," he told me, shaking his head. "Instead, I got a $7,699 disappointment that rides like a glorified scooter." The numbers tell the brutal story. This machine produces the equivalent of just 9 horsepower. That's less than most lawnmowers. The real-world range hovers around 40 miles, and that's if you baby the throttle. Try to ride it like an actual ninja, and you'll be lucky to make it 25 miles before hunting for a charging station. But the real insult? The complete absence of soul. Riders expecting the tactile thrill that made the Ninja name legendary found themselves on a silent, sterile machine that felt more like an appliance than a motorcycle. Mike bought his E1 8 months ago, and he's been trying to sell it ever since. "I've dropped the price 3 times, he said, pulling up his Craigslist listing. "Started at $6,000, now I'm asking $4,500, and still no serious buyers." The forums are filled with similar stories. Owners who believed in Kawasaki's electric vision now stuck with bikes that nobody wants. But if you think the E1's electric experiment was a disaster, wait until you hear about the Yamaha MT-10's brutal reality check. This bike promised to be the ultimate naked street fighter, packing 160 horsepower into an aggressive package that looked ready to dominate any road. Sarah from Portland learned the hard way that raw power without refinement is just punishment on 2 wheels. "The first time I twisted the throttle in traffic, the bike nearly threw me off," Sarah told me during our phone conversation. "It wasn't exciting, it was terrifying. The throttle response was so jerky and unpredictable that I couldn't trust it in tight situations. But the harsh throttle was just the beginning. The excessive vibration through the handlebars and foot pegs made longer rides feel like medieval torture, and the fuel economy was so dismal that gas station stops became a constant reminder of the bike's inefficiency. What really stung was the technology gap. For a bike that cost nearly $13,000 new, the MT-10 felt ancient compared to what competitors were offering. No cornering ABS, no advanced ride modes, no full-color display, just basic electronics wrapped in aggressive styling. "I kept thinking this was supposed to be Yamaha's flagship naked bike," Sarah said. "Instead, it felt like they took a powerful engine and forgot to engineer the rest of the experience." The resale market reflects this disappointment. Clean, low-mileage MT-10s that once commanded premium prices are now sitting unsold for months, even with significant price reductions. Dealers report that potential buyers take one test ride and walk away, often heading straight to the competition. And speaking of competition, that brings us to the Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R, a bike that proves even legendary names can fall from grace. This was once the benchmark for middleweight supersport performance, the bike that serious riders aspired to own. But in 2025, even die-hard Kawasaki fans are walking away from what has become an outdated relic in an increasingly sophisticated market. The problem isn't the 636 cubic centimeter engine. It still produces an impressive 128 horsepower. The problem is everything else. Tom, a track day instructor from California, put it perfectly. The ZX6R feels like yesterday's technology wrapped in tomorrow's insurance premiums. The bike lacks the modern electronics package that riders now expect. No cornering aids, no ride-by-wire throttle, no connectivity features that have become standard even on budget-friendly alternatives. But the real killer is the practicality factor. At 430 pounds with aggressive ergonomics, the The ZX6R punishes riders who aren't planning to spend their weekends at the track. I bought mine thinking I'd use it for canyon runs and weekend rides, Tom explained. After 6 months, I realized I was paying sport bike insurance rates for a bike that made every ride feel like work instead of fun. The insurance costs alone are driving buyers away. Young riders who once saved up for a ZX6R are now choosing lighter, less expensive alternatives like the Yamaha R7 or Triumph Trident. The result? A flooded used market where bikes that once sold for over $11,000 are now languishing on classified sites for under $6,000, often with pristine condition and low mileage. What makes this even more painful for owners is watching newer bikes deliver better performance, more features, and superior everyday usability for less money. The ZX6R isn't just losing value. It's becoming irrelevant in a market that has moved beyond its outdated approach to sport bike design. The depreciation spiral gets even worse when you look at the Honda CB1000R, a bike that promised to be Honda's answer to the European naked sports scene. When I met James at a coffee shop in Austin, he was still bitter about his purchase decision. I fell in love with the looks, he admitted, scrolling through photos of his blacked-out CB1000R. The sculpted tank, the single-sided swing arm, those retro-modern cafe racer lines. It was absolutely gorgeous in the showroom. But beauty, as James discovered, doesn't translate to excitement on the road. Despite packing a 998 cubic centimeter inline-4 engine producing 143 horsepower, the CB1000R delivers its power with all the enthusiasm of a luxury sedan. I kept waiting for that moment when the bike would come alive, James said. But it never happened. The throttle response was so refined, so sanitized, that it felt more like riding a very expensive appliance than a naked sport bike. The real frustration came when James started comparing his Honda to friends' bikes. While his CB1000R looked stunning in photos, their Yamaha MT-09 SP and Kawasaki Z900 delivered the raw, responsive feel that makes naked bikes addictive. My bike was smoother, sure, but smooth isn't what you want when you're trying to carve canyons or feel connected to the machine, he explained. Technology-wise, the CB1000R felt like it was designed by a committee that had never ridden a modern motorcycle. The tiny digital dash was an afterthought, the menu system was confusing, and basic features like cruise control were nowhere to be found. For a bike that cost over $12,000 new, the lack of modern amenities was insulting. James has been trying to sell his CB1000R for 4 months now. I started at $8,500, dropped it to $7,200, and I'm still getting lowball offers, he said with frustration. The market is flooded with these things, and buyers know they can wait for an even better deal. But if the CB1000R's refined disappointment stings, the Honda Shadow Phantom represents something even worse. A bike that feels genuinely stuck in the past. Lisa from Denver bought hers thinking she was getting an affordable entry into cruiser culture. What she got instead was a harsh lesson in why some motorcycles deserve to be left behind. The first red flag should have been the rear drum brake, Lisa told me during our video call. A drum brake in 2025. I mean, come on. But I thought, hey, it's a Honda. How bad could it be? The answer, as Lisa discovered, was pretty bad. The 745 cubic centimeter V-twin engine produces a modest 44 horsepower, which was underwhelming even when the bike was new. But paired with a 549-pound curb weight and suspension tuned for comfort over performance, the Shadow Phantom felt sluggish and uninspiring from day one. The ergonomics were another source of constant frustration. The seat looked cool in that minimalist bobber way, Lisa explained, but after an hour of riding, it felt like sitting on a park bench. And don't get me started on how the bike handled rough pavement. Every pothole went straight through to my spine. What really hurt was watching the cruiser market evolve around her bike. While Lisa was dealing with her Shadow's limitations, manufacturers like Indian and even Chinese brands were offering cruisers with modern electronics, better suspension, and more engaging performance for similar money. I felt like I was riding a museum piece while everyone else had moved on to better things, she said. The resale reality was brutal. Lisa's Shadow Phantom, which cost nearly $8,000 new, struggled to attract buyers even at $3,500. I had it listed for 3 months before I got a single serious inquiry, she said. Even then, the guy wanted to negotiate down to $3,000. At that point, I was just happy to get rid of it. But clever engineering from 2015 feels ancient in 2025. The analog speedometer with that tiny digital screen looked dated when I bought the bike 2 years ago, Mark said. Now it looks like something from a different century. The 649 cubic centimeter parallel twin engine, borrowed from the Ninja 650, produces adequate power but lacks the character that makes cruisers emotionally engaging. It's reliable and smooth, but it has no soul, Mark explained. When I fire it up, I don't get excited. I just think about where I need to go. The real problem is that competitors have closed the gap while offering more for less money. The Honda Rebel 500 delivers better styling, modern features, and superior ergonomics at a lower price point. Even upstart manufacturers are offering cruisers with full-color displays, smartphone connectivity, and more engaging riding experiences. I feel like I bought into yesterday's technology at today's prices, Mark said. His frustration is shared by countless other Vulcan S owners trying to move their bikes in a saturated market. I've been watching the classifieds for months, Mark told me. There are dozens of these bikes for sale, many with low miles and clean titles, but they just sit there. Nobody wants a 10-year-old design with no modern features, even if it's reliable. The pattern becomes even clearer when you examine the Suzuki Boulevard S40, a bike that represents the absolute worst of outdated engineering masquerading as retro charm. When I visited a Suzuki dealer in Phoenix, the sales manager didn't even try to hide his frustration. "We've got 3 S40s that have been sitting here for over a year," he said, gesturing toward the back corner of the showroom. "Even with incentives, nobody wants them. It's easy to see why." The S40's 652 cubic centimeter single-cylinder engine produces just 31 horsepower, which was modest even when the design was new. But the real insult is the technology package, or complete lack thereof. We're talking about a carburetor in 2025, analog gauges that wouldn't look out of place in the 1990s, and a rear drum brake that feels genuinely dangerous in emergency situations. "I test rode one thinking it might be a charming throwback," said Kevin, a rider from Phoenix who was shopping for his first cruiser. "Instead, it felt like riding a time machine to an era when motorcycles were objectively worse. The carburetor made cold starts a nightmare, the suspension was harsh and unrefined, and the whole experience felt cheap despite the $6,899 price tag. The competition makes the S40's shortcomings even more glaring. Chinese manufacturers are now offering entry-level cruisers with fuel injection, digital displays, and modern safety features for less money. Even within Suzuki's own lineup, riders can get more performance and features by choosing almost anything else. The used market tells the complete story. S40s are listed for months at heavily reduced prices, often going unsold even when priced below $3,000. It's not just that nobody wants them, the Phoenix dealer explained. It's that buyers actively avoid them once they understand what they're getting. In 2025, there's simply no reason to accept 1990s technology at 2020's prices. The decline continues with the Honda CB1000R, a bike that perfectly illustrates how good intentions can lead to terrible execution. When Honda launched their Neo Sports Cafe lineup, the CB300R was supposed to bring premium naked bike design to entry-level riders. Rachel from Portland was exactly the target customer, a new rider who wanted something that looked sophisticated without being intimidating. "The styling drew me in immediately," she told me over coffee. "It had this minimalist, almost industrial look that made other beginner bikes seem childish by comparison. But beneath that carefully crafted exterior lurked a 286 cubic centimeter single-cylinder engine that felt overworked from the moment you twisted the throttle. The bike demanded constant shifting just to maintain city speeds," Rachel explained. "And forget about highway riding. Merging into traffic felt genuinely dangerous because the engine was already screaming just to reach 60 miles per hour. The high-revving nature that Honda marketed as sporty translated to a buzzy, vibrating experience that became exhausting after just 20 minutes of riding. The suspension was another source of constant disappointment. Despite the premium appearance, the 41mm inverted fork and rear monoshock were tuned so stiffly that every road imperfection transmitted directly through the rider's body. I thought maybe I needed to break it in, Rachel said. But after 3,000 miles, it still felt like riding a jackhammer on wheels. What made the experience even more frustrating was the complete absence of modern features. While competitors were offering smartphone connectivity, multiple ride modes, and sophisticated displays, the CB1000R came with a basic digital gauge that looked like an afterthought. For $5,149, I expected at least some modern touches, Rachel said. Instead, I got a bike that looked contemporary but felt ancient. The resale market has been brutal for CB1000R owners. Rachel's bike, purchased just 18 months ago, is now worth barely $2,800, according to multiple online valuations. I've seen dozens of them listed on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, she said. Most have been sitting there for months, even with clean titles and low mileage. The market is just saturated with disappointed owners trying to cut their losses. The situation gets even worse when you consider the Suzuki GSX 250R, a bike that was already struggling when it launched and has only become more irrelevant with time. David, a motorcycle instructor from San Diego, has watched countless students make the mistake of choosing the GSX 250R as their first sport bike. They see the aggressive styling and think they're getting a real sport bike experience, he told me. What they actually get is 25 horsepower wrapped in plastic fairings. The 248 cubic centimeter parallel twin engine produces numbers that sound reasonable on paper. 25 horsepower and 17 pound-feet of torque. But in real-world riding, especially on California's fast-moving freeways, the GSX 250R feels genuinely underpowered and unsafe. I've had students tell me they're scared to merge onto the highway because the bike just doesn't have enough power to get out of dangerous situations, David explained. Technology-wise, the GSX 250R feels frozen in time. The analog gauge cluster with minimal digital information looks dated compared to what other manufacturers offer in the same price range. There's no smartphone connectivity, no advanced safety features, and no ride modes, just basic transportation wrapped in sport bike styling. The market has responded accordingly. Dealerships report that GSX 250Rs sit unsold for months, even with significant markdowns. But perhaps no bike represents the complete failure to evolve quite like the Yamaha V-Star 250, a machine that feels like it was designed in a different century and forgotten by time. When I met Carol at a vintage motorcycle show in Ohio, she was trying to sell her V-Star to anyone who would listen. I bought this thinking it would be perfect for learning to ride, she said, standing next to her 2022 model that looked identical to V-Stars from 15 years earlier. The 249 cubic centimeter, air-cooled V-twin produces just 21 horsepower, which was modest even when the design was new. But paired with a 325-pound curb weight and gearing optimized for low-speed cruising, the V-Star feels genuinely sluggish in modern traffic. I couldn't keep up with cars pulling away from red lights, Carol explained, and highway riding was completely out of the question. The bike was maxed out just trying to maintain 55 miles per hour. The real insult is the braking system. While most motorcycles moved to disc brakes decades ago, the V-Star still uses a rear drum brake that feels wooden and unpredictable. Combined with the lack of ABS, not even available as an option, the V-Star's stopping power feels genuinely dangerous by modern standards. The first time I had to brake hard in the rain, I nearly went down, Carol said. The rear wheel locked up immediately, and I realized this bike wasn't just outdated, it was unsafe. The technology package, if you can call it that, consists of basic analog gauges with no modern features whatsoever. No fuel injection, no electronic aids, no connectivity. Just carburetor-fed simplicity that translates to difficult cold starts and inconsistent performance. Every morning was a gamble, Carol said. Would it start easily, or would I be sitting there for 5 minutes trying to get it running? The resale market reflects the complete lack of interest in outdated technology. Carol's 2022 V-Star, which cost $4,699 new, has been listed for sale for 6 months at progressively lower prices. I started at $3,500, dropped to $2,800, and now I'm asking $2,200, she said. Even at that price, the only calls I get are lowball offers from people who want to use it for parts. But underneath the adventure bike aesthetic sits a 286 cubic centimeter single-cylinder engine producing just 27 horsepower. The first time I tried to ride it on a mountain trail, I realized I'd made a huge mistake, Mike said. The bike was so underpowered that even moderate hills required constant downshifting and aggressive throttle input. It felt like the engine was working twice as hard as it should. The suspension, despite looking capable with its long travel setup, is tuned so softly that it wallows and pitches under any kind of aggressive riding. The fork bottoms out on medium-sized bumps, and the rear shock compresses so easily that the bike feels like a pogo stick on rough terrain, Mike explained. It's not confidence-inspiring when you're trying to navigate technical trails. The depreciation has been swift and brutal. Mike's CRF 300L Rally, purchased just over a year ago for $6,149, is now worth barely $3,500, according to trade-in estimates. I see them everywhere on Craigslist and Facebook, he said. Lots of disappointed owners trying to get out before they lose even more money. The market is flooded with barely used examples, and nobody seems interested in buying them. The final nail in the coffin comes with the Honda CB1000R, a bike that had everything it needed to succeed and still managed to fail spectacularly. When Honda announced they were creating a road-focused touring motorcycle based on the Africa Twin platform, it seemed like a brilliant idea. Take the proven reliability of Honda's adventure bike, make it more street-oriented, and offer it at a competitive price. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turns out. I spoke with Robert from Texas, who bought his NT1100, thinking he was getting the perfect long-distance touring machine. On paper, it looked incredible, he told me. A 1,084 cubic centimeter parallel twin engine, Honda's dual-clutch transmission option, built-in panniers, heated grips, even Apple CarPlay. It seemed like Honda had thought of everything. But the reality was far different from the marketing promises. The engine, lifted directly from the Africa Twin, felt neutered and uninspiring in the NT1000's heavier, more road-focused chassis. It's smooth and reliable, but it has absolutely no character, Robert explained. When you're spending $13,999 on a touring bike, you want something that makes you excited to ride. The NT1000 just makes you think about your destination, not the journey. The pattern across all these motorcycles is unmistakable. Manufacturers rushing outdated designs to market, ignoring what riders actually want, and pricing their products as if brand loyalty alone could overcome fundamental flaws. Whether it's Honda's over-refined CB1000R, Kawasaki's soulless Ninja E-1, or Yamaha's punishing MT-10, these bikes represent a fundamental disconnect between what companies think riders want and what the market actually demands.